Today we're going to take a look at adjusting and closing entries. Here we're in Sage 50 and we are taking a look at the Bellwether Garden Supply sample company. If we need to do some adjusting entries, and you've already looked at the PowerPoint slideshow about how to calculate out the adjusting entries, this YouTube video is about how to enter those into Sage 50 once you've already calculated what they should be. So when we go to do our adjusting entries, we're going to of course start with what is in the trial balance. So we would go to reports, and you can either look at the general ledger trial balance or you can look at the working trial balance. If you print out the working trial balance, it acts kind of like a worksheet that we've done for Accounting 101, Pony Rides to Go. We had to do a worksheet, and it had the trial balance, and then it had some columns for you to put the adjustments in, and then it had the adjusted trial balance columns. Well, this is very similar. It gives us the trial balance column, which is this second column of numbers, current balance. This last FYE, that's the last fiscal year end balance. So that's last year's numbers that we can compare to this year if we want to. This is the current balance here in this column. And you'll notice that whenever we have a trial balance that's all in one column like this, we don't have a debit column and a credit column, we're going to put a minus sign around any number that needs to be credit. So that doesn't mean that that number is a negative. It just means that it is a credit balance. So here we have accounts payable. It's negative $80,626.01. That's not actually negative $80,000 of accounts payable. That just means we have an $80,000 credit balance in accounts payable. And of course, if we use positives and negatives like this for debits and credits, then when we go down to the bottom, we should see a 0. Here we go. Here's the total is a 0 because all our positives matched all the negatives. And so we have a 0 at the bottom of the column. Okay? Now, when you go to use this, if you like to use this, you can print this out, and by hand, there's no way for you to type on here. You would print this out, and by hand you would write what adjustments, and there is a debit column and a credit column to put your adjustments. You can put your little letter A and B like you did on your by hand worksheet for Pony Rides to Go. And then you would have your end balance. So if there's no debit or credit adjustment to petty cash, it would come across to this end balance of $327.55. The same thing with cash on hand. If, however, under prepaid expenses, which would include something like prepaid insurance, and maybe there is, you need to decrease that because some of it was used and went into expenses, then you would be debiting insurance expense and crediting prepaid expenses. So you would hand write how much you would credit on here and how much you would debit on down lower on insurance expense. And then you could come across and see what the totals are supposed to be. And this reference is for you to initial that you did the work, and maybe you would need to hand this in to your boss or whatever. This is not required, and you would not have to do this. You could simply look at your regular general ledger trial balance, and here's your prepaid expenses that tells you that it's $14,221.30 debit right now. And if you've already calculated what you need to credit that account and what you need to debit to insurance expense, you don't need that other report. So let's say that we have already figured out that we're going to debit insurance expense and credit prepaid insurance $1,000. Okay, so what do we do now? You have several ways of getting to the general journal entries, and we've seen this before in the banking. You have a general journal entry button. Over here in your shortcuts on the left, you have a general journal entry way. You could go to tasks up on the top and get to general journal entry that way. So several ways you can get to it. And we did these general journal entries on our first project of the semester, and so you should be familiar with these. You would put in the date, and of course adjusting entries are always the last day of the month. You would put in your reference. If this is adjustment A, you could put in your A. We want to debit insurance expense, we said, so we need to find insurance expense. Okay, and our explanation is that we had insurance used in March, okay, and that was $1,000, and that we then needed to credit prepaid expenses. Okay, and here we have our debits and credits are equal, and we would say save. Okay, and we would go in and put in all the rest of our adjusting entries that we had previously calculated out ourselves. There's no way for Sage to calculate out those for you. Although if you have one, sometimes you set up one that's going to be every month is going to be the same thing. And you do have the capability of setting up something like that where every month it'll do that same adjusting entry. There are also things known as reversing entries where some companies put in the adjusting entry on, say, March 31st, and then on April 1st they go in and turn around and reverse those entries, particularly with something like wages expense with wages payable, and they might go ahead and reverse that. We will not need to do any reversing entries for any of our projects. All right, so let's take a look at closing. Okay, your next step after adjusting would be financial statements, but there's a whole YouTube separate topic on financial statements. So we're going to go forward and pretend that you've already printed out your financial statements. You've gone through everything. You've figured out anything that needs to be fixed, and you fixed it, and now you're ready to go to the next month. A fiscal year end requires a year-end closing, and that will be separate. And I will show you that in a minute. But if you're just closing from one month to the next month, and you're still within the same fiscal year, then it's very simple. You just go up to the period bar, change that period bar down to the next month, and say OK. Now it's going to ask you a series of questions. Wants to know if you printed all your invoices and checks, because you're not going to be able to do that you know, once you go forward into April. Okay, so you, if there's still any that you need to print that you forgot to print, then you need to say yes. Otherwise, assuming that everything was printed before you got to this point, you would say no. Would you like to print your reports before continuing? This would be your financial statements, your customer ledgers, vendor ledgers, any other reports should all be printed also before you move on to the next month. This gives you a last chance to think about that and get that done. Finally, they're going to ask you about this internal accounting review. And this is where the software takes a look at what you've done in the past and compares it to the numbers that you have now. And tries to look and see, is anything funny? Like maybe you have a credit balance in an expense account. Maybe you have way $1 million in some account that's never had anything remotely like that. So it's going to take a look at these kinds of things, see if there's anything that sticks out, and then report that to you so you can fix it before you move on. This would be an excellent thing to do, and this is your chance now to do this internal accounting review. Now, for our class, we're not going to be using this, but a GAAP would require you to do this at least once a year. So the end of the fiscal year, you need to say yes, even if you don't say yes every month. So we're going to go ahead and say no. All right, that was all there was to it. Notice my period bar is now in April. If I go to a general journal entry, it's now going to be dated April. And if I went to my check register, it's now dated April. Everything is ready to go for April. So let's now take a look at the end of the fiscal year. And I'm going to open a different company for that. Let's see if this company will work for what we want to do. All right. This company is on August of 2014, and I'm going to take a look at my system. Alright, and here in our system button, we have the chance to do a backup and restore, as well as other places. We also have here the year-end wizard. Okay, and so first of all, I'm going to have to get to the end of the fiscal year. And so I'm going to go back into another window, and I'm going to go down, I think it's December, okay, and say okay. Alright, so now I'm in December, and this is the last month of my fiscal year, okay, and so now I'm going to go into System and run year-end wizard. Now, Sage is set up as two different kinds of years. There's your fiscal year, which is your bookkeeping year, and your payroll year. Payroll is always January 1st to December 31st, no matter what your fiscal year might be for bookkeeping purposes. Now, this particular company, the fiscal year is also January 1st to December 31st, so they're the same. So when I close out the fiscal year, I'll also be closing out the payroll year. But if I had a fiscal year that was, say, April 1st to March 31st, and the payroll year, of course, would still be January 1st to December 31st, I can close out just one or the other, depending on what month I was in. So you would have to close them out separately as you got to the end of their periods. But here we'll be closing out both the fiscal year and the payroll year together. Now notice that they show you 2 open years for both of those things. We have 2014 and 2015. So Sage always has 2 open years, and so what we're going to close out now is 2014, and then we will have 2015 and 2016 will be our open years. So we're going to hit next. Okay, and this is showing us what do we want to close. So since both of them are the same, our only choice is to close them both out. Okay, otherwise you can see in gray here that if your fiscal year were different, you could just close it, or you could just close your payroll year. Okay, here is where it gives us some year-end reports, and we can print whatever we want to print for those year-end reports. And again, if you hit a lot of stuff, there would be many reports in here, and it is expected, particularly at year-end, that you have printed absolutely every hard copy you could print, because your computer might crash tomorrow and you need these hard copies of absolutely everything, and that you've gone through them with a fine-tooth comb before you run this year-end wizard. You cannot go back. Alright, so I'm going to assume that I've already printed everything, so I'm going to check none, and I would assume that you would have already printed everything once you got to this point as well, but this is giving you one last chance. Okay, this again, GAP says that you should do an internal accounting review at least once a year at the end of the fiscal year. And this is the end of our fiscal year, so we really should do this internal accounting review. For our class purposes, however, we will not be doing that. We don't actually have years of data available for it to compare to or do things with. So we're going to go on to next. Now, it requires you to back up, even though you might have already backed up. Okay. It also highly recommends you make at least 2 backup files before closing a year. And you're going to keep one in reference, and you're going to store the other one in a secure off-site location for audit trail purposes. Okay, so we cannot go on until we back up, and so we are going to hit back up. Okay, and then we will hit next. Okay, here are our new fiscal years that are going to be added. Again, I'll have 2015, and now I'm also going to have 2016. Now it's confirming this is the one that's going to close 2014. Now, after closing my new open years, will be 2015 and 2016. Is this what I want to do? Yes, it is. Okay. Okay. You're going to press this begin close button when you're ready. Important, you cannot cancel the year-end wizard after this point. Do not shut off your computer during the close process. Depending on the size of your company data and your computer memory, the close process may take considerable time. If you have a really big company, this might take all night or whatever. So you might want to do this at the end of the day when you're getting ready to leave, and then by the next morning everything will have been done. For our projects in this class, of course, our projects are very small compared to a big company, and so it won't take but a couple of seconds. Okay, so I'm going to hit the begin close. Okay, congratulations, you've successfully closed 2014. Now here are your two open ones, and we click finish. Okay, if I go back to one of the normal windows, notice that my period is now on January 1st of 15. And I want a post-closing trial balance. Okay, then I am going to go to my general ledger trial balance, and this is my post-closing trial balance. It's already closed everything from my revenues and expenses and owner withdrawals into capital, and here's my assets liabilities already set here. Okay, and this is dated, however, as of January 31st. So we actually need to go into, into fonts, which there's a separate button, but we can go through here. And we're going to put in, it should be dated December 31st. Of 2014, or it can be dated January 1st of 2015. Okay, so this is our post-closing trial balance, and you can print this out and put this in with all your other 2014 stuff to show that yes, this is now closed and we are ready to go forward.